I'm just going to introduce you to the three of us. Evening, Kim, how are you? To the three of us who are here this evening. So my name's Rich Ayling. I'm the Club Support Manager for England Athletics covering the South West. My colleague Sarah Gardner is here as well.
Hello, hi.
Sarah covers Hampshire, Isle of Wight and Sussex, is that right?
Yeah, and the Channel Islands and the Isle of Man.
And the Channel Islands as well. And I want to introduce you to Sean Price.
Hi.
Sean is from Avon Valley Runners. Sean's been involved in a range of community initiatives. He's a parkrun director involved in Westbury Wheelers, which is a cycling club, and has done a range of stuff supporting the community. So it'll be interesting to hear his take on things later on. Just before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping, just so you're aware. Please use the question box at any point if you have any questions. We'll either pick up on them during the webinar or at the end. Please keep your microphones on mute. And just so you're aware that we're recording this webinar and it will be sent out afterwards, so you'll be able to hear the content from it, and it will include the questions as well. Okay, at that point, I'm gonna make a start. So I'm gonna take us into our slides. Just so you're aware of the format, it will be a little bit of a start from myself and Sarah from England Athletics, and then we'll pass you over to Sean, who'll be able to bring things to life a little bit, hopefully for us, and then we'll finish with a bit of a wrap up and questions. Okay, so onto our first slide. So what are we looking to discuss this evening? We've kind of got sort of 6 key areas we want to go over with you. We want to really kind of explore how you would go about setting up an offer for sort of secondary age children getting involved in a road running club. So we're going to look at some of the club administration. We're going to explore the peoples and skills required. So as all of you will be aware at your local clubs, it's nothing without the volunteers, and that's so true for setting up juniors. We're going to explore funding. Obviously, an important thing is being able to make these sessions sustainable. So what funding's out there. We'll touch on kind of venues, suitable areas to take training. We won't go too much into coaching information, but we will explore a little bit about ratios and formats. And then Sean's going to give us a real life case study, which will hopefully kind of explain a little bit about the journey that one club's been through. At that point, I'm gonna pass you over to my colleague Sarah, and she is going to take us onto our sort of starting point this evening. So we're going to have a little bit of look about what you need to do before setting up a junior section. Again, if you've got any questions at any point, please type it in the box, or if you can't hear us, please let us know. Okay.
Hi everybody, hope you can hear me. So lots of road running clubs get in touch with us in our roles as club support managers to ask for information and advice about how to set up a junior section, which is great. It's a really exciting time for clubs to obviously expand and grow, and to look at obviously getting more people into the participation area of our sport. It's got its not issues, because nothing's an issue, but it's got his benchmarks and it's got its standards that we need to obviously uphold to make sure that we are delivering a appropriate product for the appropriate people, with obviously the measures and everything in place, whilst adhering to UKA licensing and welfare and safeguarding and all of those sort of stuff. So I'm going to cover the boring bits, if you like, but the very important bits that need to be sort of considered before you start looking at setting up a junior section. I'm sure some of you out there have set up a junior section already and have had great success. So please, again, if you want to chat about examples that you've got, it's great for other clubs to share from that. So before you set one up, what do you need? Well, you obviously need the club environment, you obviously need coaches, you obviously need a will to want to do this. It goes a little bit further. You do obviously need a good, strong committee structure. So what do we mean by that? Well, if we look at the people on the other side of that table, we're talking about a welfare officer. So every club, I'm hoping, has got a welfare officer or is thinking of engaging one. We certainly recommend in clubs with junior offers that we have a male and a female welfare officer, and certainly in larger clubs there may be more than 2 people. A membership secretary is obviously key, so this person is going to be looking at the offer that we've got out there for juniors. It may be that there's a family membership tie-in, there may be a junior offer, there may be an under a student offer or something like that. So there could be different levels of membership that you offer the juniors that you're going to encourage into your club. So again, that's a discussion that you have before you obviously go out there with this great idea and start. You might be looking at setting up a working group in advance of setting up your delivery date. So your working group might be people that aren't necessarily on your committee. It might be some parents, it might be some junior coaches that you've got amongst you, it might be some wannabe coaches. So again, look at the different people that are interested in making this work and get their ideas, get their advice, and then you've got a kind of vision really as to where you're going to go with your junior offer at your club. So the biggie, so you need obviously coaches. So you've probably got an abundance of LERFs, leader in running fitness. You've probably got some CERFs, coaching running fitness. You may also have some coaching assistants, and you may have some athletics coaches in your club. What we'll say on this is that you can only offer with what you've got coach-wise. So you can only work within the limitations of your license. So if you're a LERF, you can lead sessions, you can lead running sessions for anybody that's 12 years or over. If you're a CERF, you can look at delivering coaching sessions for anybody that's 12 years or over. So there is a bit of a difference there. If you're a LERF, you may not have sort of skills to introduce sort of strength training or something like that, whereas a CERF would. A CERF can obviously then look at writing session plans for others to deliver, writing training plans for people to take away. If you're an assistant coach, you may be from an athletics background, you're able then to help an athletics coach with coaching juniors. And when we talk about juniors in an athletics coach environment, we're talking about people that maybe below the age of 12. If you're an athletics coach, you can coach juniors from any age. And when we talk about athletics, we ideally talk about juniors being 7-8 years plus. So the important thing here is if you're a LERF, if you're a CERF, you cannot be working or accommodating or writing or delivering sessions to anybody that is under the age of 12. So hopefully that mops that up a little bit for you. But obviously our presentation tonight is about setting up a junior section for people that are 12 years or above. But we just felt it was really important to really identify that you're not down at the track taking 8-year-olds. There's no caveat to that, unfortunately. We've got, parents down there. We set up a junior park run. We've read a module on it. It is very strict. The UKA licensing remit around who we coach and what we coach and how we do it is set. So hopefully you've got a large pool of volunteers. We're not just talking about coaches there. We're talking about parents that got on board. We're talking about people that deliver your kit, people that you sponsors, people that arrange the travel. So hopefully everybody in your club, however small or large your club is behind what you're trying to do, and don't be put off by all these rules and regs. It could be a really exciting thing and a really successful thing that as a road running club you're looking to do. So you need people, so a strong committee structure in place, processes and procedures. No doubt you've got lots of those already. Things such as a social media policy. How do people communicate within the club, outside the club? Do you have WhatsApp groups that the coaches use? How are they governed? Do you have newsletters? Do you have an up-to-date website? Do you email members? Do you email the parents? How do you communicate? How are you going to communicate what you're doing? And if you're talking to juniors, and when we talk about juniors, we're talking about anybody that's 18 years and under. So how are you going to talk to those and how are you going to engage parents when you need to? So codes of conduct, lots of clubs have already got those listed, maybe on their website, maybe in member areas. Lots of info from us and from UKA as to codes of conduct for parents, for coaches, for team managers, for athletes. So there's loads of stuff on there as to what is expected to be a member of the club and how you're going to conduct yourself from there on in. Your club constitution, that needs to recognise if you have juniors in your club. So if you're looking at doing this, a big first point of call is going to be to look at that constitution and to see whether the juniors need to be written in there. If they do, as you know, I'm sure it's going to be brought up at your AGM or an EGM, but it needs to be recognised that if that element of your club is going to grow like that, that your rules and regs obviously reflect that. Club comms, we've spoke about already. Is everybody with me so far? Everybody happy? Okay, great. Thank you, George. I'll take that we move on to something a little bit more exciting maybe. So I'm going to take you through the next slide. So how do we make it work? So funding. So there is funding out there. Obviously, as a club, you'd be looking at making a junior offer sustainable. So how are you going to set it up? How is it going to work initially? And how is it going to continue to be successful? So you would be looking at your membership fees, obviously, of inviting and retaining juniors in your group. You may be looking at coming to people like ourselves who offer satellite club funding. We've just successfully funded many clubs, existing affiliated road running and athletics clubs, into setting up satellite clubs for junior members. So that's something that we can certainly give you more information about in the future. There's lots of information on the website already, but people have been getting grants up to £550 recently to help with costs and coaching and venue hire and equipment and all that kind of stuff. Community fundraising platforms, there may be stuff locally that you can tap into. There may be things that your local council can help you with. I know of some clubs recently that have managed to get fully funded first aid courses that have been funded for them, which is great. And again, the more contacts you've got and the more local information you've got, the more people that you can obviously ask, can you help us? And the more people you ask, the more people are likely to say yes. A lot of clubs are going down the fundraising route internally, and it may be that you've got somebody that's a parent or an athlete that's really into this area with their work or something, and it may be that you've got a really good skill set that you can tap into there, of somebody that could be talking to companies locally about sponsorship or fundraising or events, or you could perhaps look at a social person in your club that wants to raise more money by doing more social activities for people. So there's lots of ways of getting more money in. Obviously, the better position your club is in financially, the better you're able to obviously accommodate a new section of your club and to obviously make it safe and sustainable going forward. So your venue. So where are you going to train? Is it suitable? Are the juniors, so we're talking about 12 to 17-year-olds here, are they going to be cold? Are they going to be running on rough surface? Are they going to be in the dark? Is it easy to find? Is it the same place where the club is? Is it safe? How are they going to be dropped off by parents? Are parents going to wait around anywhere for them? Is there any warm areas? Is there a first aid area? Is there a defibrillator? What equipment have you got? What equipment do you need? You know, obviously lighting is a biggie. You know, do you need to purchase high-vis vests? Where are you going to be running? Have you risk assessment the routes? So that's the biggie. It's great having all the the foundations in place with the committee, the constitution. What are you going to offer? How's it going to work? But then what are you actually going to do? So I'm going to hand over to Rich now on that subject, who's going to be talking a little bit more about the more exciting things about what it looks like when you've got those juniors in front of you.
Okay, so kind of following on from what Sarah's spoken about in terms of once you've got a venue, I suppose one of the key things to think about is the structure of your sessions, and a big consideration is, are you going to do sessions which are specific for junior athletes, or are you going to look to incorporate juniors into senior sessions? Now, I think Sarah touched on this slightly, but it's certainly worth just clarifying that from a welfare perspective, anyone is considered to be a child under the age of 18. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at sort of 12 to 17-year-olds that coaches in running fitness and leaders in running fitness could potentially be working with. The structure of the sessions will ultimately be dictated by the people and the resources you've got available. It certainly would be sensible to suggest that where there is the option to do a specific junior session, this setup's probably safer, and it's probably easier to make it a more specific offer for juniors. Although we're not going to go too much into coaching this evening, one of the key things to probably think about is that the needs and wants of an adult compared to a junior athlete are very different. We're talking about different physical needs, but also kind of emotional needs. And I suppose to put that into context, as well as thinking about the juniors, we need to think about the adults, because we need to make sure that they're in an environment that they would want. So in an ideal world, you'd probably be looking at a specific junior offer. So having kind of a weekly session, which is got qualified coaches delivering it. It's available for juniors. And then once those juniors are almost getting to the age of 18, you could transition them over to seniors. Now, it's not to say that that's the only way of doing it, because we've got examples of road running clubs which have effectively incorporated juniors into senior sessions. But there are things to think about. One of them is very much about the welfare of both the junior athletes and the senior athletes, and not necessarily welfare in kind of the normal perhaps kind of thought process we would have on it. It might actually be thinking about, is the session suitable for somebody of that age? And I suppose a really good sort of thing to consider is that a senior club might say be training for cross country. Well, actually, senior athletes would potentially be competing over sort of approximately 10k in cross country, whereas junior athletes, even sort of under 17s or under 20s, might be only competing over 5 or 6k. Whereas athletes who are sort of under 13s and 15s could be competing anywhere from sort of 2.5k upwards. So the actual kind of needs they would want from those sessions would be very different. So I think the message would be, if you were going to incorporate juniors into senior sessions, you would need to think very clearly about how you'd be able to provide different training offers for the different individuals involved in it. And probably, how would you incorporate things which would promote agility and balance and coordination, and also some game-based activities which would still be really beneficial for sort of developing athletes. So that would be probably our starting point, is have a think about what the structure of your session looks like. Any work you're doing with junior athletes, the same as seniors, ratios for leaders and coaches apply. We work on a basis of one qualified leader or coach could work with up to 12 people, but certainly we would say that's a minimum. Ideally, we would want more people to be able to support it, more qualified leaders and coaches. Particularly if you looked at the second model, if you looked at incorporating juniors into senior sessions, one of the questions would be effectively, how do you manage welfare? And going back to the last slide where Sarah was speaking about, where you would train and what would sort of the venue be like. One of the challenges you have if you start taking group runs with juniors involved in them is, how are you going to effectively safeguard those individuals and your other sort of members of your group whilst they're running around a town which is sort of 3, 4, 5 miles, whatever it might be. Age ranges is a really key point. So obviously somebody who is at the age of 12 compared to somebody at the age of 17 should be competing over different length distances. They'll be at a different stage in their personal development, and also potentially at a different stage through puberty. And what they will need from sessions will be very, very different. With younger athletes, it's probably advisable to reduce the amount of time they are running on hard surfaces. So where possible, to use a track or be running on grasses or trails, or even kind of like a red grass surface would probably be advantageous. A big one for us is always the training environment. So something we speak about really passionately is when anyone's coming along to a club session, they should be coming along to an environment where it's fun and it's welcoming and it's friendly. And one of the considerations you would need to think about with setting up a junior section is, how can we make that training environment first class? How can we make it appropriate? How can we make it, a really, really sort of special environment where people want to come along? And finally, it's kind of competition formats. A lot of road running clubs probably affiliate with their kind of county association and take part in road running leagues and off-road race leagues and some cross-country events, etc. It's just thinking about, what would that competition format look like for junior athletes? A few counties do have, specific junior road race leagues, but it's not every county has that. And it's probably thinking that actually, although we'd be a road running club, a lot of our junior athletes would still benefit from competing on the track. So you might be a road running club that encourages some of your youngsters to focus on middle distance events like 800 or 1500 meters. Hopefully that's given you a bit of a snapshot of some of the things to think about when it comes to the structure of your sessions. We don't have an online offer as such, but we do a workshop which is around youth endurance, and we will certainly be looking to put these on in different locations. It'd certainly be something I would consider looking at on Athletics Hub if you're in the process of setting up a junior section or going to. And again, speak to your local club support manager, and when something like that would be available. At that point, hopefully Sarah and I have kind of been able to set the scene a little bit about some of the things to think about. in terms of setting up a junior section. And at this point, I want to pass you over to Sean Price, and he'll be able to take you through Avon Valley Runners' story and how Junior Avon Valley Runners was developed. I think just so we've got a really good understanding of who this man is. Sean's been involved with a range of roles within Avon Valley Runners. He has been involved with committees. He's been involved on trackside. He's been involved in a range of initiatives, but he comes from it from a real community angle, having been involved in the park run. So at this point, I'm going to pass you over to Sean, and he'll tell you a little bit about Junior Avon Valley Runners and the journey they went through.
Thank you very much, Rich, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think it needs to come too much closer, Sarah. I'm okay. My background really is I'm also a town crier, so I don't really need the microphone any louder, so I've got that as well. But this is my first webinar, and just to give you an example of how junior I am to the webinar scenario, I've dressed up thinking that I'd be on a webcam, and you can see me tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So I do look quite smart, but
very smart. Thank
you, Sarah. Thank you. So basically, we set up Junior Avon Valley Runners as a junior section to Avon Valley Runners some 8 years ago. We're based in West Wiltshire, which is just south of Bath, actually. So Bath's in Somerset. We're on the Wiltshire-Somerset border, and we use a facility in Bath. We'll talk more about it later. We were formed in 1986, and that was when the road running club was formed, and the junior section didn't come in till 2012. Primarily as a road running club, it was born out of Trowbridge Athletics into a road running club independent of Trowbridge Athletics in 1986. And we compete in all kinds of competitions. You can see there Wiltshire Road Off-Road League, affiliated to Gwent Cross Country League, as well as Southern National Club Cross Country Championships. We're a really large club as well, and often walk away with annual trophies on the off-road and road. We've got a diverse membership. My wife and I became secretaries of Avon Valley Runners about 9 years ago, and it was very much of the old school, with a lot of really quick runners, a lot of men aged 30, 40, 50, maybe even 60 at that stage, and there were very little youth or even young adults involved in it. But now, as most clubs are, even the older clubs have taken on beginners, juniors, multi-sport athletes, and competitive runners as well, still in the club. In fact, more competitive than ever, but more diverse. Can we move on, Rich? There we go. The history of junior coaching. So, no, historically, we've not had coaches at all. So what would happen is a few guys would get together and just run. And in fact, before 2010, a lot of them would just run as fast as they possibly could for as long as they possibly could, and almost made it into the club sessions into a bit of a race in the evening. So it wasn't really conducive to juniors, leave alone runners of all ability. There have been junior members in the club, and unless they were fairly quick, they struggled to keep up. And this was kind of before the safeguarding regulations came in and the welfare officers and all that business came in. So there were a few generally children of the runners in there. So my wife and I, when we were secretaries in 2011, 2012, we had a lot of children coming up to us or parents coming up to us. We started our local park run in 2011, and they would be involved in the park run, and they would come up and say, "Well, is there a club that we can join? We absolutely love this running." That was born off the back of the park run, really. And we said, "No, sorry, we haven't got a junior section." But I'm afraid you can only say no to children for so long. And we had one of our own children was interested in it as well, which is always a bit of a bonus. And in the end, we thought, well, let's look into it. So what we did is as I say, we set up Southwick Country Park Run. And I'm the ED and been the ED for 8.5 years at that. And my wife was an RD as well. And we decided that we would set up, well, first of all, we decided we'd set up a junior park run. And there was only 2 junior park runs in the whole country at the time, or 3 maybe. They were on Saturdays and Sundays. So I spoke to the founder of Park Run, Paul and Hewitt, and said, we want ours on a Saturday because we want to benefit from the volunteers that come out off of the park run and then go straight into a junior park run. But at that stage, they decided that the park runs for juniors would only be on a Sunday. So rather than do a junior park run on a Sunday, we decided that we would do a junior park run equivalent on the Saturday. And we managed to get a permit and insurance for that. And we did that straight after the park run once a month, 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning in Southwood Country Park. And some of the park runners decided to help us out with that as well. So that came along and we kind of made it into a race. So it wasn't a junior park run at all. It became a race, but it was free to enter. And I stole some ideas from Paul Sidney Hewitt in terms of how to do the timing. So there was like washers on a big kind of U-bolt that we would hand out to the runners as they came over the line and things like that. It was a monthly 2K run, and we put it into we made it into a league as well, and we had like age records for every single age. So rather than the age brackets you get at a park run, it would be for every single age, and there was PBs and percentage improvements and all that, and with a kind of the focus was on participation, and we would have a presentation at the end of the year as well. That was very successful. Volunteers approached the JAVR committee about developing a junior coach section. So that's how it was born. So we went to the committee and we sought approval of the committee there. So we had to approach the main committee, but we decided to do it and set up our own working group. So we would have the kind of junior Avon Valley Runners committee was separate, and it was called a working group, which reported to the main committee. And like Sarah mentioned earlier, we had to go through the club constitution, which had to go to an AGM to amend the ages that we could have at the club. So that's another thing that you'd have to bear in mind. You'd have to get on board. And if you take into consideration that there's going to be a lot of members in your club that really aren't that interested in juniors, and those people may have an influence over the committee, they may be on the committee, and that can be a difficulty as well. I think it's much better now than it used to be, but I'm sure that it can still exist. You know, and if you kind of empathise with people, some of them are probably coming to club to get away from their children, maybe, or to have a little bit of a break. You know?
Really?
Yeah. So the fact is you have to take that into consideration. You recruit parents of children that are likely to get involved and willing participants, and lobby the committee members to make sure that you can get the committee approval and then the club constitution approval. So it says here the working group, we formed a committee, which was a working group, and membership secretary, welfare officer, treasurer, media director. I think it's really important to get people to take on specific roles, delegate out roles, and make sure there's some succession planning. Don't be too reliant on one single person, because that can make you a little bit vulnerable. So that's what we did. We did have a really good coach, and it was difficult to find someone to succeed the coach because he was fully committed and was absolutely excellent. And we were a club with very, very few coaches. In fact, he was probably the only one at the time in the whole club. And he was willing to come along to the juniors week in, week out. So we had to look at getting more coaches to follow on. But it's difficult when you've got trainee coaches and coaches that are fairly new when you've got one that's particularly good. So you have got to take into consideration succession planning, because everything moves around eventually. We managed to get an amazing venue up at Bath University. I think in 2010 it was used for the Junior Commonwealth Games. So the facility at Team Bath, I mean, it houses the Team GB pentathletes. I think it does the bobsleigh team as well. It's a sports university, and the sports facilities there are second to none. It's even got an indoor 100 meters track where we do our stretches after we've been out on the track. So we are very, very lucky to have that facility. And it's very important to get your partnerships up as well. A particular good one was the county sports partnership for Wiltshire, which is called WASP, and they were absolutely brilliant. The fact is, if it's an exclusively junior section, then the money is there. It tends to be there. The funding is there for the junior section. So I know if I go to them for money for like a female section, or a totally female section, or totally junior section, they're really, really responsive, and you can usually secure some funding one way or another, or at least be guided towards the right directions. So key partnerships we built with the town council as well, the county council, and there you go, Wiltshire and Swindon Sport. That's the county sports partnership. So we got community funding as well. So you want some. So what you really need to do is get someone in your working group, like on funding, and someone on safeguarding, someone as a welfare officer, and treasurer, and all that business. And also, I use the word ring fenced. Our committee actually kind of ring fenced some funds as well. And they were kind of contracted to. We kind of did a deal, because if you think about it, the juniors are the runners of tomorrow, the adults of tomorrow. So that's what you need to take into consideration. That's the kind of selling point. That is the foundation of the club. We went to the committee and we said, look, all these people are like, our youngest people are like in their late 30s, which is, and we're supposed to peak it on running at 28, aren't we? So, the juniors is the future. So we kind of went along those lines, and that seemed to work. Should we move on? Yeah. So the JAVR Story, so it's for 4 to 14-year-olds as well. So they do move on and become they transition as a kind of transition arrangement for the juniors to integrate with the adults. So we offered a weekly session. That was on a Wednesday night at the athletics track up in Bath, 8-lane athletics track up in Bath. And then a second section was in Trowbridge in West Wiltshire on a Monday as well. So, and success, it just comes. If you put your team in, it will come, But, to some extent, you don't have to aim for success. It will just come if you work hard enough. And if you have the right people in your team, it will just come. It's a lot to do with the coaching, obviously. You realise that. There's a lot to do with the coaching. But we've won the Wiltshire Junior Road Race League multiple times and received awards from EA for the Southwest Initiative of the Year as well. So, it's entirely possible, even at, since 2012, we've only been going 8 years, there's a junior section. And we didn't ever expect it, but junior athletes have gone on to represent Wiltshire, Avon and Somerset at county level. In 2018, Max Davis, you can see in the picture there with his England top on, won a silver medal at the National England English Schools Track and Field Championships and selected to run for England in 2019 as well. So the fact is Avon Valley Runners is just a kind of a fairly kind of unrecognised club, and it manages to create amazing children into that. And there's amazing children in your area as well. There definitely is amazing children in your area, but the people at the top are the people that access the top clubs, and that's because they've got the top coaches. But if you set your section up and your coaches work hard with their athletes, you too, just like Junior Avon Valley Runners, can have athletes literally at every level, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal. And that boy there, that Max Davis, he came to Parkrun, and he was running around Parkrun, and he said to me, is there a junior section, a junior club that we can go to? And literally, that was all he was doing, was running Parkrun. And we're thinking, how can you say no? How can you honestly say no to these children? They are obviously talented children, but he wasn't running crazy good times then. He was like, 20 minutes or something like that for a 5K, which is way better than I could do, but yeah, it's a long way to go. And I'm not saying that all of them are going to do it. In fact, they won't. But just realizing the potential of your local children, how much would that mean to you? To me, it means amazing. There you go. It says Fiona and Sean Price played a pivotal role in the formation of JVI. It was much more than just me and Fiona. There was so many people involved, and I couldn't possibly name them all. But that's what you need to do. You need to make sure that you get as many people involved as you possibly can. Delegate out the roles, get people specializing in what they're good at, and everything will come. And at the end of the day, we don't expect a Max Davis, we don't expect an England runner, but that's a nice bonus. We just expect smiles on faces, and even more than Max Davis, I get girls, a couple of young girls run around Parkrun now. They run for Junior Avon Valley Runners. They're just smiling and doing sports. It's absolutely incredible. I don't know what you were like, but I dreaded it when I was at school. But that was a long time ago. But literally, it's a much better sport now, and it's because it's structured, because it's safe, and because you've got people like England Athletics to back us up as well and help us out when we need to. I think that's a good point to finish on. Is that all right? Am I done?
Just if you just might just go and just kind of summarise, and I guess how JVR achieved this. I suppose.
So I've touched on it. So the strong team of volunteers. I think I've got that message over. Whereby, don't ever say no to volunteers. That's my kind of mentality in terms of, is your when I'm doing park run, because I'm not so involved with the junior section now. When at park run, saying, do you need, if you've got a full complement of volunteers? We've never got a full complement of volunteers. Okay, so we always say yes to the volunteers, even if it's double up on marshal posts, which is much better. So don't say no to volunteers. And you don't know who you've got. You run with these people. You think, well, they're a good runner, or they're an average runner, or they can run with me, or whatever. But you don't know what talents they've got deep down. And they may be excellent for safeguarding, a child welfare officer. They might be a treasurer. They might be, and all these social media. That's an art form, and you need kind of fairly young people tend to be quite good at that. When I say young, I'm 53, so most people are pretty young. So that would be a strong idea, is to get a good team of volunteers. Don't say no. And the external funding, there's the external funding and the internal funding. I just think is a good idea to make sure that you're in with your county sports partnership, your council. And I'll tell you, one of the tips that I have got is why not get your MP or your local councillor involved to come along and maybe start the race or something like a guest starter and stuff like that, just so they can see what's going on in their own area. And they're going to be impressed, I promise you. They're going to be proper impressed, and they'll relate to it. And then maybe one day when you need them, they'll come up and they'll come good for you. So the external funding, build partnerships is a great idea. And the training venue, that's obviously a really important thing. And you can speak to EA about it. We're really lucky. It is about like 10 miles away to the track in Bath, but it's such a worthwhile facility that we go there. We've now got our own track in Trowbridge as well, but that's a small running track, but it's floodlit as well. So
you don't necessarily need a track though, Sean, do you?
No, you don't need a track. You don't need a track. We were very lucky, to be honest. But you could, like you say about the nurse, can get involved as well, and as long as they've got the kind of safe environment, that's what you need, a safe environment. And I think I must know what you're saying. It's kind of sometimes grass, if it's a nice flat surface, grass is kind of quite kind on their joints as well. I'm right on that, I think, really. So that's the appropriate training environment. Invested in people and an experienced coach. I'd say change that experienced coach to experienced coaches if you possibly can. Get your committee to dig deep. Go to your committee and say, I want to come to the committee and I want to ask for some funding. Try and lobby a couple of committee members before you get there and say, look, this is going to be really, really worthwhile. Try and get them to see the sense of it. If you can get a couple of committee members on, that's my tactic. Don't tell everyone. But I go to the committee and ask for money, and I don't think I've ever been refused. I've had a hard time. They haul me over the coals, but I've kind of got a bit of a reputation in saying, well, we need to be doing this. We need to be doing this. And this is why other clubs are doing it. And we're behind, or whatever you need to say, you say it. And lobby a couple of other people, get them involved so that when you come up, they're not all looking at you thinking, well, what's he on about? There's a couple already know about it, and they'll support you. Is that good?
Sure, and that's absolutely fantastic. I think certainly some really helpful tips there in terms of the journey that JVR went through, and I think there's a key message which isn't just related to juniors but just related into kind of coaching setups and club setups in general, is invest in those people who are involved. It's much easier to retain volunteers than it is to always be recruiting them. So kind of contingency planning and investing in the future. We've had a couple of questions come up. So the first one has been sent by Lindsay Cook. So thank you for this. So question for, I've just lost my question because we've had another one come through. Just give me one moment. Okay. So how did you get the rest of your club on board with this? And was there much resistance? And it's a fair comment. Adding a junior section could be seen as quite a challenge.
Yeah, there was resistance. As you can imagine, this club's from 1986. With these old guys, and they're lovely guys. I wouldn't say anything bad about them, but the fact is, very resistant to having a junior section. You do need to get as many people on board as you possibly can. And like I was saying about the committee members, you need to pick on those that you think might be sympathetic to your cause. Get them on board so that, and even say to them, why don't you say to them as like, look, when I come in, is there any chance you could be supportive of it? Because it tends to be with committees that if one person starts reluctant to kind of disagree with you. I know it can happen, and there are always those objectionable people within your club, within your committee that will say, but don't be afraid of it. And to be fair, think about it from their point of view. They may be, like I said, getting away from their children. They just joined the club because it's adults. They didn't join it because they want the children there. The children, there's a load of paperwork with the children. There's red tape and add all this. And it is hard, but stick with it because you know what you can achieve. And the proof is at Junior Avon Valley Runners. But there's clubs like it all over the country that are achieving. And that is great for our children. And it's not just about reaching high levels. It's about smiley faces. Smiles is where it's at. People enjoying running, going, chatting, getting in a minibus, taking them to a little 5K one evening or something like that. And they're all buzzing in the bus.
Thanks for that, Sean. That's really good. I'm going to pick up on a question which came through from Karen Dodsworth. And I've seen there's been a couple of answers have already come on the message board. But the question was, any examples of other venues that work as we have no access to a track? And I think certainly a key message to take away from this is you don't need a track. Obviously, light is always going to be one of the primary issues in terms of where do you train in evenings. For me, I believe sort of training on grass surface is a really fantastic example. A little bit softer on the joint, and it potentially also helps with sort of encouraging juniors to pick their feet up because they're of the ground. But you could use like a local trail area. Depending on where you are in the country, you might be able to do something near the beach, or you might even do sort of an indoor session. You might go and use a sports hall, or possibly using kind of like a 4G pitch. I think when it comes to the venue, the things that I would be suggesting is it's about the imagination of the coach and also the participants, because it should be a two-way process. But also celebrate what your local terrain's like. It always stands out to me. I'm a Southwest lad, and whenever I go and watch cross country and sort of junior events, I'm always impressed by the youngsters from Cornwall. And I can't help thinking a lot of the time the reasons they do so well is they've always got some really steep hills to run up and down. And I think that's probably an example, of how you can utilise your local terrain. There's not an exact particular surface you have to use. Obviously, if you have tracks and so forth available, fantastic. The key things is probably going back to that slide that Sarah touched on earlier on, which was about what does your facility have. If you're doing a junior specific session, it's probably thinking about the capacity to be able to sign somebody in, sign someone out, toilets, first aid, etc. But really it's about using your local resources. Parks is always a great one, like woodland areas. The big thing is just making sure that it's accessible for those who are coming along. I've seen that George answered this question. So he's had access to a clay track in late spring and summer, but use a local park and a bowls club allow us to use their second field. I was going to say you're a very brave man using a bowls club's pitch for your running surface. I remember my days working in the leisure centre and was banned from stepping on that at any point. I've seen a question come from Sam. How many juniors did you get to your very first race or session? And how did you ensure that there would actually be kids there and it would remain sustainable? In terms of the first coaching session, Sean provided me a bit of information about this. So I know that there were 12 juniors that came along to the very first coaching session. But within the space of a year, that had grown to over 30. And at different times, there's been as many as sort of 30 plus juniors coming along. In terms of the first JAVR 2K, can you remember how many came along to that, Sean?
We must have it on record somewhere. If they go to the Junior Avon Valley Runners section and look at the results in 2012, I think it was 2011, then they could see. But I think it was probably, I think we did have, within a year, we had 50 people turning up to the 2K. But use your press, use your local local reporter in the newspaper, and use social media as well. That's the way to get it. But I think we approach schools as well. That's the way to get involved. And there's usually a coordinator of schools that does the cross country and things like that. So you need to get all these people on board and work out kind of so you do press releases to get a kind of a mail shot of email addresses to both media outlets and to and even go to radio. I've had the radio over there as well, and kind of TV, and just send out to all of them. One of them might bite and they might pick it up and you might get more.
So this has sort of touched on Ted's question.
Yeah.
So Ted was asking, do you approach local schools? We have limited coaches at our club, and there is a maximum capacity of junior athletes we can take on board. How do you avoid a surge of juniors coming from one or more schools, assuming the offer of coaching sessions should be equally and fairly distributed amongst all schools in your area? So in terms of approaching local schools,
yeah. So you need to speak to obviously the PE teachers there, but the good thing about a surge of having a lot of juniors is you've got a lot of juniors' parents. So provided they've got parents, and most of them have, then you can tap into those resources and have regular meetups with parents and try and get them on board and say we do need extra people in. And those parents may become working group members, they may become committee members, they may then become alerts, they may become curves. Everyone knows what those are, don't they?
It may be that you set up a pilot project initially and you see the demand, because obviously you can only work with the coaches that you've got at that stage. So rather than introducing a really big waiting list, you might just start a pilot and see how it goes, and then speak to the committee about how you can grow from there on in.
Yeah.
I think that's just something Sarah and I often speak about, just generically with club development. It's often about starting small and developing. So there's nothing wrong with doing, like Sarah alluded to, a pilot type project, or it might be something you do to begin with. You might offer sessions of like an 8-week course or a 6-week course, probably not a million miles away from what you do with like a cash to 5K, and you identify the number of people you can come, and then you can obviously review it as it goes through. Know even young sections where some of the track and field clubs do sort of 365, which is sort of run, jump, throw type activities. It's not been uncommon for them to have a capacity number of people who book on, and if people pull out for any reasons, then spaces are opened up. I've seen there's been some really, really good advice being just given around. I've seen sort of George and Karen have been back and forth. So talking about just trying to keep people safe. So about the use of using rechargeable lights, also kind of trying to encourage juniors to wear high-vis clothing, hats and gloves, etc. It's worth looking at some of those partnerships. So it's certainly worth looking at speaking to local police, fire departments, etc. They in the past have been known to provide sort of some freebies and some lighting, etc. The other thing is probably, when you look at other clubs, it's not uncommon for when somebody's perhaps joining a football club that there'd be an expectancy that they have shin pads and football boots and training kit, and there's certainly nothing wrong with having a list of those things. One thing that Junior Avon Valley Runners did do, which was very, very unique and certainly helped with some of the safety, is they developed a partnership with Trowbridge Rugby Club, and they were able to raise in the region of about £25,000-30,000, which enabled a 3-metre wide path to be developed all the way around the outside of the rugby pitch. It's nominally about 400 metres, and it's a slightly unusual looking shaped track, and if you go on Google Maps and you scroll around a little bit, you'll be able to see it. I'm not suggesting that everyone on here is going to go away and trying to raise £25,000-30,000 and develop a partnership like that, but it did provide somewhere safe.
So the good thing about that is floodlit.
Yeah,
you didn't mention the fact that was a floodlit pitch we went round, so we can use that all year round. But that's used by the club and by the juniors as well. In fact, the juniors are coming over tomorrow because it's double booked up at Bath, so they'll be there tomorrow evening.
Okay, so I think Sarah's been fairly good at kind of keeping on top of various questions which have come through. I think we've got a question from so George and Ted. Both of those have been answered, I believe. No. Oh, sorry. So George, I have a question. So Sarah's answering George's question, and we'll take on Ted's. Yeah. Sorry about that. Sarah and I are not quite on sync here. Are there standard template letters or posters available to send to schools? What I would say would be really worth looking at is England Athletics have just developed a marketing hub, and there are promotional materials on there. I believe that you can edit some of those materials, which would certainly work as sort of posters and so forth. The other thing I would say is if you were sending a standard template letter to sort of local schools, there's no harm in sending it to your club support manager, or possibly speaking to they used to be known as county sports partnerships. I think they're now just known as active partnerships, but they might be able to also advise where best to direct that. A lot of sort of schools still have kind of a sort of a school games organizer or a school sports sort of partnership officer as such. So there might be a little bit of insight there.
What about a poster competition amongst the junior section in your club as well? Maybe they could come up with some of themselves, because some of these children are amazingly creative, aren't they?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely it's that sort of more than a club feel, which Sean's really touched on, and certainly something we as an organisation support is it's not just about performance, it's about developing fantastic people. So I think that's a great example of it. I've seen Sarah's just got to come back providing some information about the Leading Athletics course, which is available for those who are 14 years plus and can work well for some of your older junior athletes, and also can be used in sort of parents, etc. Kim, I've got a message from you saying our local comp didn't want to know. I mean, I think the reality is sometimes that some of the partners and some of the people that you want to work with might not always work. I suppose that's a little bit like sort of just generally sort of partnership building. But I think if you have a key offer and you're able to kind of engage some of your members or your groups and promote it, diversity, whether that's through local papers, social media, word of mouth, there's probably different ways you can do it. And I think a key message is, Sean said earlier, your junior athletes are senior athletes of the future, but also in terms of when trying to make help with the club growing, making it more sustainable, and making it more family orientated, having opportunities for juniors fits really well within that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on a little bit now. So thank you ever so much, Sean, for a really, really fantastic overview. As you can imagine, Sean is a busy man, so he is now getting ready to go and present. So I think it's in the region of kind of 40, 50 people maybe this evening. 75 about an initiative that his club are doing. So we're being trusted to continue without him here. So what we're going to do is we're going to move on to a slide now, which just will tell us a little bit, I suppose, about are you ready for junior members? Sarah, do you want to take that one on?
Yeah, sure. So we've spoken lost my voice already. We've spoken a lot, obviously, around the setup, how it's going to look, getting everybody on board, making sure you got the framework, who are you going to advertise it to, what do the sessions look like, how do you continue, how do you grow, how do you manage demand, all of that kind of stuff. So there is a lot to consider if you are at a road running club and you want to do this. But as we've alluded all evening, you are not alone. You can't do this alone. You need the buy-in of your club. You need the constitution to reflect that, and you need the working group, the coaches and everybody else to see the vision and to want to make this work. So just to wrap up, really, so are you ready for junior members in your club? So how is this going to impact your senior membership? This is a question that comes up quite a bit. Some of your seniors, no doubt, will not want this. Some will think it's a great benefit. They can bring their juniors along. Some may wish to change clubs. So think about the impact that it could have on your club overall. You might want to do some research with your club. You might want to do a survey and get their feedback, and you can act on that. That might help you sort of set your stall out initially and able to move your idea forward if there's enough demand. Do you have the infrastructure and the volunteers to provide a first-class offer? You might be not able to provide a first-class offer initially. It might be a pilot. It might be a test. It might be an 8-week couch to 5K style course. It might be something that you set up as a summer club, a summer camp. It might be something you get some advice from your local athletics club on. It might be you go along and speak to them or see what sessions they do. Use other people to get some help and advice, but you've got to have your foundations in place before you advertise it and have juniors turning up. You want to be professional. You are a professional club. You want to make sure that what you are offering is great. And if you had children that were going to do it, that they would enjoy it. And it's a safe environment, it's structured, and it's well led. Which leads on to the coaches. So have you got suitable coaches? If you haven't, then it might be that this project is just going to be delayed a little bit whilst those people get qualified. But they've got to be qualified before you start. You can't have LERFs taking 7-year-olds around a track. You can't have one person with 50 children running across unlit roads. Have you got enough resources? They don't all have to be CERFs or athletics coaches. They just have to be working within the remit of their license, and you've got enough people to manage the amount of children you've got, the juniors that you've got. And again, you know, like we just said, you might have a waiting list, you might have a capacity level. If you can only cater for 20 children, then that's what you do. You know, don't set yourself up to fail by trying to be everything to everybody from the start. Do you have a vision and a business plan to help this work? Richard and I, in our roles as club support manager, we speak to a lot of clubs about their vision and about how they're going to, you know, what do they see success looking like? What areas of their business do they need to work on? You know, and every club is different. Every club is really good at some things and has got some developmental issues in other areas. It might be that they need to brush up on processes and procedures. It might be they need to brush up on a strong committee at times. It might be they need to look at their communication or their website. What is it as a club you need to work on? And does that impact on what you're trying to do here initially with the junior runners? You know, are there other things to do first before you look at that as an area of the business? And where are you going to do it? Is it safe? Is it lit? Doesn't have to be a track. You don't have to grow the athletes that Sean was talking about, which hopefully you would find, you know, if that's your vision and the kind of club that you are. But remember, it's about getting juniors into our sport, whatever level they are, whatever they're going to aspire to be. It's letting them leave with a smile on their face, having had a great session that's been structured by a great club that they're proud to be part of, and that they're going to tell all their friends around. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of an insight into the kind of depth of setting up a bit of a junior section for road running clubs. We'll happily take for the next 10 minutes any other questions that you've got. So please feel free to you know, continue to chat to us and we'll take your questions. If we don't get around to all of them, we will send you our input when we send out the presentation to you. So just a couple of links there, which will obviously be on the presentation when you get there. Myself and Richard's email addresses are on there if you want to speak to us about anything, or if you're not in the areas that we work with. Richard is the southwest and I am the sort of southeast areas. You will also find on there details of who your club support manager is. So if it's the fact that you want to look at having a youth endurance workshop, or you've got 10 young athletes in your club that want to get into coaching and you might want to have a bespoke in-house leading athletics course, have a chat with your club support manager. I'm not saying we can do everything, I'm not saying we fund everything, but we can certainly work with you to try and, you know, find solutions to helping you develop this. But you're not on your own, we're here to help. It's a great initiative if you and your club are behind it. So hopefully that's been of benefit to you. Thank you very much for your time, thank you for your questions, and we'll stay around for 10 minutes and answer any further ones that you've got. Anything finally from you, Rich?
No, just to say that, yeah, thank you very much for your engagement. We'll have a look at going through any questions which are coming through now. I see we've got one from Sam. Before you leave the webinar, we will just pop up a sort of a survey, if you don't mind completing that, just to say whether you found it helpful, so we can try and make sure we're kind of improving these sort of webinars in the future. I'm going to go on to Sam's question. Do you recommend that clubs charge for their junior section either a weekly fee for the training session and or an annual membership fee, or do you think a free offering is better? My advice would be absolutely charge both. I think they should be paying a membership fee and charging a weekly fee for training sessions. I think ultimately the way I would pitch it is you're paying for a coached service. And that money can be reinvested back in the club, whether that's going into training more leaders, more coaches, whether it's developing some of the younger people within your clubs. Really good example that Sean didn't go into with junior Avon Valley Runners is they identified there's a couple of juniors became captains, and what they wanted them to do is they took on some of the support roles within sessions, sort of doing signing in and signing out and welcoming new members, and they kind of did a little bit of reward and recognition, so got them hoodies and things like that. So those are the kind of things that you can do where you can invest in them. I think Sarah's just sort of put a piece of paper in front of me with a really good point. And when you're getting people to pay weekly sessions and when you're getting people to pay annual membership, you get a little bit of commitment, which is really important. And it's not uncommon if you were paying for a venue to ask people to pay, you know, X number of weeks in front. So they might pay 6 weeks in front or 8 weeks in front for coming along to those sessions. And what it means is that you're not going to run at a loss. You'll know you've got enough money to cover your outgoings. So hopefully that covers Sam's question. Karen Fantastic. Thank you so much for your lovely comments. Really glad to hear that you're inspired, motivated to look at sort of establishing sort of junior offer. And yeah, it's been great to hear of other people's experiences tonight. So thank you very much. I think George has put a really, really good point on here, and it's Athletics 365 is a great asset to start and build on for planning sessions. And, you know, we've tried to very much focus this around road running and 12 plus, but Athletics 365 is an offer which would sort of start our younger athletes, traditionally in track and field clubs. But absolutely, some of those resources are still fantastic into the secondary years. You know, we touched on that point earlier about sessions being different and for juniors. Really trying to develop some really good movement patterns and some game-based activities and making it fun. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic point. Sam's just come back with the commitment from a fee is what I was thinking about, albeit it can be quite a modest fee. Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, you know, it's one of those, ultimately you look at what your outgoing is going to be and what do we need to cover costs and build for the future. And I think certainly a key message that we would be putting across here is really invest in your volunteers. So kind of make them feel welcomed, and whether that's kind of investing in your volunteers who are the future volunteers, so paying for people to go on training courses, etc., or whether it's actually saying, you know, a massive thank you to the people who do go out on those cold, wet and rainy evenings and stand trackside. You know, you'd be surprised, you know, taking them out every so often for, you know, a beer and a meal, or you know, perhaps a contribution towards a voucher or something that they'd be interested in, can go a long way. And, you know, we feel really passionately about looking after volunteers. So Sam, I think that's fantastic. I can see you're writing away, so I'm going to wait with bated breath.
And as we know, without volunteers, we haven't got an offer.
Yeah,
we haven't got a sport. We're not able to grow. You know, and there's obviously the model out there that a few clubs rewards coaches through payment or through different reward and recognition schemes. Some clubs are paying junior coaches to keep them in the sport, to give them obviously a little bit of pin money so that they don't have to go and take a job elsewhere. Clubs do different things in different ways, and it's whatever they choose to do. You know, we're not here to police that or to give advice as to what you should or shouldn't do. But we all know, and whether we're in the sport or working with the sport, we're all coaches. We all spend lots of time in the dark, in the dank, dealing with children, adults, and sometimes it's not always fun, but we do it because we enjoy doing it and we see the rewards. But without the volunteers, we haven't got an offer.
No, I think Sarah's summarised it fantastically there. Sam has just asked, is the recording of this going to be available afterwards for us to listen back to? Might be useful to dip into specifics at a later date. Yes, it is being recorded. We believe what will happen is you'll receive an email when it's sent out. I don't think Sarah or I are going to hold our hands up and say we are technologically the most talented members of our team.
All the best presenters.
So we will follow up on that. But yes, we know it'll be coming out. And again, our email address is on there. So if you wanted to sort of direct anything specifically to us, we can help. But again, depending on where you're based in the country, you've got a club support manager who would be a really good local point of contact. I'm just going to give you a moment just to see if anyone else has got any questions. And if not, I'll then just put the survey up, and we just really ask you to complete that so we can try and improve it for the future. But just a massive thank you for your time this evening, and also a massive thank you to Sean. He's really brought the sort of the Avon Valley Runners experience to life and sort of talked through what they've done, and just showing kind of what can be achieved with sort of passionate people and a real drive towards supporting community development.